you did have a Donald Trump related episode of your podcast, and talk about like making your presence felt at Meadowlark in a big way. Your first podcast episode there was essentially confronting Dan Le Batard about his past interviews with Donald Trump that he attempted to scrub from the archives. So when was Dan made aware that you were working on that?
Dan was never told in full what we were doing until we sat down to record it. And so Pablo Torre Finds Out. The premise of it had always been sort of twofold. Like, we want to find out in an investigative journalistic sense, but we also wanted to fuck around. Apologies for the profanity. But truly, like, part of it is we want to do stupid things seriously, and vice versa. And so for me, like, nothing encapsulated that mission statement more than starting my new job, the thing upon which I staked the future of my family, by confronting the co-founder of said company with things that are legitimately humiliating for him. And so Dan didn't know that I had all of this stuff teed up this way. I was going to do it as a confrontation. I was going to do it by essentially dumpster diving in the end, to your point about, like, he wanted to throw this all out. Like, this was not available online anywhere. Everyone had forgotten about it, which speaks again to just like the way that we're overloaded by everything. And so the fact that Dan had interviewed Donald Trump, Dan Le Batard, maybe the foremost opponent of Trump when it comes to just people who can't stop talking about Trump in sports media. The fact that that guy had Donald Trump on as a guest on his show, as a friend of the show, as a call-in guest over 3 years, and that tape had been lost and gone until I exhumed it off of a hard drive in Miami, only to confront Dan with the truth of his past in ways that were, I think, both deeply introspective, but also legitimately cringe-inducing. All of that is absolutely, a dangerous way to start your career somewhere. Yeah.
Were you aware of how much they had spoken in the past? Like, did you have that in memory, that you knew that he had interviewed him multiple times and had him as almost a frequent caller over those few years?
Yeah. So the way I stumbled upon this is where I am also complicit and guilty, is that I showed up to co-host Dan's radio show for the first time in 2015 in person in Miami when it was at ESPN. And that day we had a call-in guest that turned out to be Donald Trump. And so I interviewed Trump with Dan and Stugatz on air on live ESPN radio. And at the time, my question was like, why are we doing this? And it was not, certainly it was not enough to not do it. But I was informed that actually this happens a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like Donald Trump's a caller. Donald Trump says he loves Dan's show. Like, there is tape of Donald Trump repeatedly complimenting Dan Le Batard and how much he loves the show. And so ever since that day where Dan sort of said, like, actually he's a call-in guest, I've been obsessed with finding out why, how often, what you guys talk about. Because that episode that I did with Dan, in which Trump was a call-in guest, was the last time he ever appeared on the show, because I think it was like 3 or 5 weeks later, Donald Trump declared his candidacy as president of the United States. And then everything was like, oh, this thing, we can't really do this anymore.
Well, and I guess in Dan's defense, he's not alone there. I mean, there's a lot of radio shows. Donald Trump was not hard to find throughout. I mean, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Stern.
Yeah, right. Think of the amount of times that he was on Howard Stern, and the way Stern has kind of, tried to alienate himself from Trump in the years since he declared his candidacy for president as well.
Well, listen, that's part of the introspection here, is that we are not the show. Pablo Torre Finds Out is not a show that is meant to just engage in moral scolding.
Right.
Like, part of why I wanted to do this episode was because I wanted to reckon with how good a guest Donald Trump was.
Yeah.
Like, he's good at sports radio.
Yeah,
Donald Trump
super
is kind
entertaining.
oh, no doubt. He's funny. Like he's Donald Trump, for all of the other stuff that is now obvious, I don't even need to say anymore about like caveating why he's, a bad guy, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
The reality is he's an A+ sports radio gas bag. And I loved listening to these tapes in a way that made me think about, oh, this is his superpower. Like if you're running against Donald Trump now, right? The whole point is not, again, if you're strategizing politically, like you should not be in denial about that. You should not deny that Donald Trump is really good at being on camera, being a character, being on TV. Like you almost need to concede at the start of every debate. I would advise, at least, like, this guy's going to be a lot more charismatic than me. He's going to be funnier than me. You're going to like him more than you like me. He's going to seem more real. And like go from there. Like don't try to compete in that way. We should not be in denial about why Trump got elected. A lot of it is because he is, in fact, the guy on these tapes, and it's compelling. It's good radio.